Hey Brian, what's happening, man?
What's up, Pete? How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I've got my iced tea here because
Nice.
I'm kind of dragging a little bit. I need some caffeine. You were giving me a hard time about yawning in the in the green room, but we'll let folks kind of get situated here. But yeah, before we get jamming, you got any big plans coming up for the weekend here? Who are the Cal Bears going to lose to this weekend? Hey
Oh,
yo.
the race to the bottom between Cal and Stanford football this year.
It's
It's
pretty
pretty
it's pretty
ugly. You
it's
know,
pretty
it,
bad. Is
and for either team, you go 1-11. If the one win is against Cal or Stanford, whoever has the axe, that's who ends up. That's all that matters. So we'll see in a few weeks here. But yeah, I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Boston and excited to fly back to California tomorrow morning.
oh goodness. Actually, I'm going to be out in Boston next week. I'm going to be visiting a bunch of Atrium customers. I'm doing the red eye on Sunday night because I hate myself, apparently.
Yeah.
Should be amazing. Um, awesome. Well, we can get jamming here. Folks, thanks for joining us for Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm Pete Kazanji. So while we're getting started here, I'd love to give everyone a few moments to kind of get familiar with Zoom, the Zoom webinar interface here. This event highly encourages audience participation. So please do use the chat panel, leverage the Q&A panel, etc. Let us know where you're calling in from. I'm here in San Francisco. Brian is in lovely Boston, probably closing deals out there. No doubt. And and please do use the opportunity to kind of learn from me, learn from Brian, et cetera. So for folks who aren't familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development related disciplines. And the community's mission is to create an environment for our 30,000 and growing members to answer questions that they struggle to solve on their own, help them see around corners they may not know about, just get smarter. And so the way that we do that is through great live sessions like what you're about to experience today, through our robust online forum, which is my favorite, because then I get to answer questions in the Q&A forum and geek out, and in-person events. And so for folks who weren't previously admitted, you should have access to the community now. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. Power Hour is a unique format. There's not really a specific piece of content we're going to be going through here, like a masterclass or whatever. Instead, it's, Brian and I are going to be talking about a number of things that questions that people have asked ahead of time, questions that folks have been, brought up to, we'll bring up during the event, et cetera. And so we want you to use the chat tab and the Q&A tab. So please do so. So with that, let's go ahead and do some introductions here. I'll be quick since you guys have seen me before. I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance. And one of the particularly cool things about Atrium is it takes 5 minutes to set up with a read-only connection to your CRM. Just sign in and you got a world-class metrics harness telling you how your reps are performing across 100 plus metrics. So that's super fun. I also am the founder of Modern Sales Pros, and prior to all that, I started a software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. So that's a little bit about me. Brian, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you spend your time on there at airSlate, what airSlate does, and then maybe a little bit about HelloSign ahead of time, because or before that, because we're gonna be talking about bottoms up sales motions, and I think it'll be helpful for people to understand that context.
You got it, Pete. So thanks again for having me. Really excited to be here. And this is so I was talking to Samantha, who's our own head of revenue operations at airSlate, and
Oh,
is
nice.
actually with me. What's cool is Samantha was with me at SLI Systems. She was with me at HelloSign, and now she just joined me over at airSlate. And we were talking and explaining.
Not tired of you yet?
No. She
No.
takes a break from me every once in a while, but then she comes on back, so it's awesome.
Just long enough to forget how bad it is.
Exactly. It's like, it's like my wife described, I've got 4 kids. And so my wife always talked about pregnancy, like that if people remembered what pregnancy was like, giving birth, they wouldn't do it again, but like they block it out. And so Samantha
Yep.
just magically remembers the good times, and excited to have her again. But we were talking,
Wonderful.
so she, in many ways, for our sales team, is like our ideal customer profile, head of revenue operations,
Yep.
and talking about Modern Sales Pro. And she was just saying how this is the clearinghouse for her for when she's exploring a new idea or looking at tools. First thing she does is check out the discussions, check out, let lots of other smart people do the first step of research for you to find out what's out there. And so
Yep.
for airSlate, we work with a lot of Salesforce admins, head of sales ops, revenue operations, because what we do is we help you get your documents done. And so that
Yep.
can be e-sign. That's what I did at HelloSign. We've got a great e-sign product at airSlate called Sign Now, but really the more interesting part is around airSlate, because what it lets you do is not just get documents signed, but it helps you figure out where did that document need to come from. So if you're pulling info from Salesforce, your CRM, and you want to automate that, because sales reps hate doing manual tasks and putting things in.
Oh no, they love it. They love it.
And they never mess it up either, right? They never skip
Oh
a
my
field
God.
or anything like that. And then
No,
when
no. That's
no,
what that's what validations rules are for. Ha ha
yeah,
ha.
and then
Sales prevention functionality.
yeah, that's every salesperson's favorite thing to do is figure out how to work around those rules.
Yeah.
And then when it comes back, a salesperson's like, hey, I signed the deal, I'm done. Well, you need to let finance know, you need to let customer success know, hey, should we provision that, kick this off? And what airSlate does is it automates that entire process, no coding needed. It does it through automated bots. And so
Wow.
that's the quick, we've got over 1 million paying customers across the globe. And we're headquartered, US headquarters is Brookline, Massachusetts. We've got over 800 folks who a year ago were in Kiev. And so many of them have moved to other places. And I'll tell you, I've never
Oh goodness.
it's the most phenomenal thing. I just want to, take a moment to say, I have never seen anything like the way our people have responded in the face of, unthinkable tragedy. And people have just, moved to Poland, they moved to other parts of Ukraine, and then they came back to Kiev, and people are literally working from bomb shelters and things like that. And we as a company have said, hey, take all the time you need and things like that. But overwhelmingly, people have said, you know what? I want to make sure I have something to come back to. I want to help keep building this company. And what else am I going to do? And so people have just, not even missed a step. It's been pretty phenomenal, but it's tough being in the US and seeing what's happening in Ukraine for all our work colleagues.
Nice. And then how big is the sales org over there at airSlate?
Yeah, so the sales org is about 45 people right now. And so we are so we're heavily, for a company our size, we're over 100 million in revenue. And a lot of that was built on the B2C side. And so we have PDF Filler, which is our cloud editing tool. So if you need to edit a PDF, fill that out quickly. That's the bulk of it. And so what I was tasked with coming over 3 years ago is to help build out the B2B motion, which is airSlate is much more a B2B product. And so that's been my mission. I've got a few folks who were with the company when I joined, but a lot of the team, of those 45 or so people, 40 of them have joined since I came on 3 years ago. So it's been really exciting to see the growth on the B2B side.
Wow. Okay. Got it. So 45-person sales organization with like a very muscular, what's interesting, you got a PDF filler, which is like kind of like, it sounds like that's like more of like a B2C solution. And but then airSlate is obviously B2B. But airSlate also has a self-serve motion. Is that got it? So it is very HelloSign, because like the HelloSign sales organization, forgive me if I'm wrong, I don't think it ever got to a similar scale that you're talking about right now. Am I misremembering that, or is that fair?
It was a little bit short of it. I joined, the company was about 1 million in revenue. And we, at the time I left, right after we had sold to Dropbox, we were about 30 million in annual revenue over at HelloSign. So the sales org was somewhat of a similar size by the time I left. We've actually, one of the things we've done at airSlate is invest more in our SDR team. So we have more SDRs than I had at HelloSign. I think that's one of the secret sauces of what we're doing right now is heavily in SDRs, because one, we have this massive customer base of 1 million people. And so not all of those are ripe for B2B, but a good portion of them are. And so having those conversations,
needles in the haystack, right?
finding those needles in the haystack. It's the golden grail for PLG companies.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's something I want to talk about. So yeah, you've done this quite a bit with HelloSign, and then also now at airSlate. I think this is a topic that's like very top of mind for people. Like at Atrium, we don't have like a PLG motion. We have a sales assist motion. Like we're more like Datadog, where like it takes like 5 minutes to set up an Atrium account, and then we sell on customer data. Like a sales operations person will turn it on, or a sales leader will turn it on, and then they'll go through like a couple week evaluation process or whatever. Like maybe it gets shelved, or maybe it keeps going. But so in our case, it's like the problem that we're addressing, or like in our sales motion, is more like understanding how people are like consuming the product, and if they're having like getting enough of a success to be like, okay, this makes sense for us to commit to to an annual contract, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have the needle in the haystack problem, which can be a big one. I wonder what are some of the ways that you guys address kind of doing that, like picking those needles out of the haystack? Like obviously there's things that are maybe like easier to do, like, oh, like let's just look for the relevant like B2B domains or something like that. But you probably also want to look for things that are like usage signifiers as well. And then I guess like you even have a different problem too, where there's like this orthogonal product PDF filler that's like not, I mean, it's like related, but it's like not the same. And then of course you have people who are like using airSlate on their own. Maybe you can kind of take some of our folks through how that works right now, how you guys like solve those two different problems, like finding the needles in the haystack with PDF filler, and then finding the other needles, maybe they're nails in the haystack because they're like a little beefier, right? In the airSlate haystack.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what you just articulated is a big part of the reason, like I'm excited to go to work every day. And it's part of what drew me over here was that, hey, there's this massive opportunity. How do we, fully make use of it? And so I think one of the things, having a close relationship with our product and growth teams. And so looking at not just domains and lead scoring, but things like PQL. So the concept of product qualified leads. And we really look at how do we decrease friction as much as possible? We want people coming in, we want them trying the products, and not, I think modern enterprise software companies where you move away from this concept of, oh, we're going to hide our pricing from you or make that mysterious and high barriers to entry. Rather, hey, we would like to get them in and using the product. And then from there, look for signals of people who, hey, it seems like you're starting to use it. You've done this many templates and sent out this many flows. What can we do to help you? How can we better enable you? And look for those type of things. And I think that's one of the prerequisites for being a successful PLG company is to open those doors as much as possible and reduce the friction.
And so tactically, how are you guys going about that right now? Like, I know this notion of like, product-led sales solutions, or like call it PLG CRM, what have you. There's a number of companies that are out there that are working on that, whether it's like Endgame or Calixa or Correlated Labs. There's a number of others as well. Actually, a bunch of them were participants in the last Modern Sales Virtual Summit. Have you guys homeworld that? Like, how are you guys going about that? Are you using a dedicated solution for it? How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, so we've built a lot of our own signals and look for things internally. That's what we have somewhere around 400 or 500 engineers, and many of them I think it's a secret weapon of ours is being able to find these incredibly talented engineers in Ukraine who can build things. And I think like many companies, it's heads of sales or heads of operations that I talk to say, my problem is I don't have enough data. It's rather, how do I make sense of all the data that I do have, and
Yeah.
trying to go through that. And so that's one of the things we're looking at. And then, just another part, like on a more tactical standpoint, is we're in the process of having some of our SDRs, converting them to using a concept of what we're calling self-serve assist, that someone comes
Yep.
in. It's probably not large enough to go to one of our account execs and things like that. And we want to just empower our SDRs to, hey, if they think it's going to be a larger deal, great, let's pass it off. But at the same time, if someone needs to start with 2 or 3 seats, just that, oh, well, we want to get you to 10 seats. And so I know you only have 2 users, but let me get you to talk to an account exec. It's just not a good use of anybody's time. And so instead,
Yeah.
we really lead with an idea of, hey, let's get them in, let's get them using 2 seats. Let's make sure they're successful, that they onboard, they start using the product. And then organically, we're going to see them grow to 10 or 20 seats, and having motions to reach out to them and identify them that way.
Yeah, I love it. That's something when we were doing, so when we first started Atrium back in 2016, we did about 150 customer interviews during the first half of 2016. And I remember having this conversation with Stephanie Schatz, who's she was the head of sales at Xamarin. And we were talking about exactly that, about like, it was essentially like an SDR role that kind of acted like a baby customer success role. Where literally it's just like, hey, I see that you're using right now. In Xamarin's case, it was it's like a development framework for it was for cross-platform mobile development. Microsoft eventually acquired it. And this was like a while, like this is 2016, and they were like, yeah, when people download the SDK, we engage with them. We don't call them because they're engineers, right? And they don't want to be called, but it's more kind of like, hey, I'm here to help you in any sort of capacity. And most time people ignored them, but then when they didn't, they would come back. And this is actually something that we do quite a bit with our product as well. Is we try to make it as porous as possible. We do this more on the customer success side of things, where we do have live chat in the product. Previously we had done asynchronous kind of support ticketing, and we really wanted to, especially with we make data-driven sales management software where it's we're democratizing and simplifying sales math and sales metrics for sales managers, but so it's not fussy and problematic like Tableau or Looker or what have you, but it still can, sometimes people can be actually, what am I looking at right here? Help me understand that. And so we want to make it really easy for them to escalate to a support person. And then moreover, what we do with our support personnel is not only do they they'll have that chat conversation, but they're hey, let's just escalate to Zoom. Let's pop onto Zoom right now. And then you have a moment, you have an opportunity to educate them further right there. But we call it making it porous. And I think you can do that. In our case, the economics of Atrium make it such that we can only really do that with customers. But I think making it porous and making it such that the customer or the prospect in you guys' case can reach out and get get unstuck, or consume more, can be a very powerful thing. Are those your SDRs that are is that the SDR profile that's doing that, or is that the customer? What exactly is that profile?
For us, that is the SDR profile. So people are, we have just this massive marketing engine and millions of visitors per month. And so even with lead scoring, sometimes we think someone might have a fit, might be someone who could be sales qualified. And so we try to have those live conversations, and we're trying to engage with them on, like you said, on drift in as many ways as possible. But we also find, hey, it turns out this person needs to buy 2 or 3 seats. And so from a sales economics standpoint, having that SDR be able to say, hey, let me, direct you, let me help you with self-serve. You can buy right here, and have them do that. The economics of that are so strong that it helps with everything else, and we can invest more in marketing to find those companies who then we pass along to an account exec. And so, that's one of the things we're doing. And then I have kind of a hypothesis, and I'd love to hear your take on this. I'm sure you've seen the
Mhm.
stats of just in the last 2 or 3 years, the explosion for, mid-sized companies and the number of products they have in their software stack. And so, now it's like average, a couple hundred people in a company, and they probably have over 100 different software products. And, I think with Atrium, part of what I see you doing is keep adding more and more value, because I think people are saying, I don't want to add one more thing and one more thing to my sales tech stack. Instead, I'd rather
Mhm.
invest more in a couple of things. And I think, you see this with Gong, and you see this with, SalesLoft and Outreach, that they're trying to do more and more across the stack, and that, we're going to start to see some consolidation. Is that something you're seeing
Mhm.
with Atrium, or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think though, I mean, it's I forget what the name of the founder of Netscape, or the CEO. Oh, Jim Barksdale. So he's like well known for his like bon mots, right? Like, and he's the guy who said like, hey, if we're gonna use data, let's use data. If we're gonna go off opinions, we'll use mine. And then the other thing that he's well known for is the unbundling and unbundling, right? And
Yep.
I think that's like, it's kind of like the natural mechanism by which like new technology shows up. It's like it's innovated at the periphery. It solves some sort of problem. If it is hard technology to develop, it then becomes a race. And I think this might be a Mark Andreessen quote, but I'm not 100% sure. Can innovation get to distribution before distribution can get to innovation?
Right.
Right. And so if something is like, if something's like deep technology, and so like then it will take a little bit longer than for the incumbents to like get to that innovation, if they will, whether it's building it or like acquiring it. And if it's like if it's not deep tech, it'll be faster. If it is deeper tech, it'll take longer to happen. And so and then those companies, like the initial innovators, will break out. And so you're kind of seeing that right now, where I think maybe some examples there would be like basic forecasting functionality is really like not super complicated. Like if you think about it, it's just like a roll up. It's just it's like a kind of grandiose Google sheet, right? Like all the information is already modeled in the CRM. Ideally, like you probably need some sort of process whereby to ensure that there's inspection and cleaning going on. So like the amount fields are up to date, the close dates are up to date, the stage dates are up, or stage field stages are up to date. But once that like is done, then kind of like rolling it up is just like, oh, that's like a Google sheet, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's why you're seeing that sort of like basic functionality show up in like the SalesLofts of the world, the Outreaches of the world, the Gongs of the world, what have you. And then you have the like kind of the innovators in those spaces, like the Clarys of the world, as an example, are more being like leveraged by like the more advanced functionality, or like people who need more advanced capabilities there, like who have sophisticated forecasting motions, or like maybe they have like multiple CRMs that need to be forecasted across, or like all sorts of stuff like that. So I think that that's kind of like what I'm seeing there. But and then what ends up happening is like the consolidation happens, and then a new bunch of like new set of use cases start being addressed. Yeah, a
Yeah.
new set of use cases, right? Like
Now we're going to
and
go best of
that's got
breed, and everyone goes back to that, right? It
well,
consolidates,
and then
everyone
and
goes,
yeah,
well, now we need,
and the new breeds show up,
right. Yeah.
right?
A whole new, yep.
Right? Like, oh yeah, I mean, imagine, yeah, I guess like this is a great eSign's a great example of this, right? Like EchoSign was acquired by Adobe a while back. DocuSign was able to get to scale and become its own thing, and then of course like added on ancillary functionality there. HelloSign, of course, was acquired by Dropbox, which is like a an emergent suite of like SMB SaaS kind of like tool chain, if you will. And so like, yes, it's the circle of life. It's a SaaS circle of life, just like Simba,
Hold up.
right?
Yep. There you go. I
Yeah.
was right there with you.
Exactly. Well, so I have another question for you regarding kind of like PLG motions, and this is something that like a lot of our listeners will kind of think about is, okay, you've got these like self-serve users, right? How do you up level those conversations? Because it's one thing to have like, you got 2 users, you got 4 users or whatever, but like, how do you then navigate? Like, we kind of talked about the identification piece a little bit earlier, but I want to like less talk about the identification piece, which we already talked about. I want to talk more about the like, cool, now we know that like they're a good suspect, and like one, we need to know like what is the total size of prize, or like how big is this pie, like that we've taken one slice out of. Like, oh, okay, we could actually, like, there's like 100 slices in here. Like, oh, okay, great. And then how do you guys navigate engaging with like the people who would be the ones who would take you wall to wall, because those people are probably not the people who are like using on the sly. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yep. And so I think, ideal customer profile goes a long way, that having to know, who the user might not necessarily be your decision maker and who you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And so being able to understand that. And, I always ask people, my little trick question to reps is, hey, what feature of ours do customers love the most? And they all start rattling things off. And I go, you're wrong. Customers don't care about our features. What they care about is what problems do they have that we can potentially
Outcomes.
solve.
Yeah.
Yeah, they care about outcomes. They care about their own problems. And so being able to identify those use cases and talking about things like, a great example, and this is where, we're using our own tech, is that handoff from a SDR to an AE. So someone comes in, the SDR does a great job, they qualify it, they take these amazing notes. They might have taken them like on a notepad, and then they're going to put them in the CRM later, but they'll do that. And then the customer then goes and talks to the AE, and they're starting from scratch. And it's like when you've called into an airline and they transfer you to someone, and all of a sudden you're starting back at the beginning. And that is such a frustrating process. And so what we've done is we actually use airSlate to do that we pull up what we call our customer needs analysis form. We pull it up on a Zoom, and we'll show it to the customer. Like, hey, here, based on conversations I've had with other customers, here are a few questions I have. So in order to get you routed to the right person and understand your use case, and they start typing it in real time. And then at the end, what they say is,
it's like you're doing like a live disco session where like you're typing it in. It's kind of like, it's like the doctor sitting like with the EMR here, be like, so what about and they're like, yeah, and then like they're typing into Epic, and like Epic is telling them the next question to ask.
Exactly like that. And then the cool part is, it never happens with your doctor. We actually send it to you. We'll say to the customer, hey, here's what I captured. I'm going to send this over to you. If you forgot anything, if I missed anything, if I got something wrong, go ahead and update it. And then it's going to go to our account exec, who you're going to be talking with tomorrow. And so now the customer feels a lot more confidence. Wow, they actually captured, what I was talking about. And so now there's a great basis for the conversation. And then what it does is it also writes into, we use this airSlate form, but then it writes directly into Salesforce. And so they don't have to go copy it in or anything like that. It just automatically updates into Salesforce. And so that's just kind of an example of how, like, hey, now when we're talking to a SDR manager or a head of revenue operations, that's one of the pain points that we touch on. Are you having issues with redundant conversations, and how do you get that info from the SDR over to the AE, and what does that look like? Is that as streamlined as it could? So we might have one person using the product, but instead of necessarily talking fully with them or trying to uncover everything with them, we're also checking in with the person who we know based on our history. Hey, we've been able to help the head of revenue operations, sales ops, a COO, or a VP of operations or director of IT. They're the ones who have these problems that we can help solve. And so we use that as we're going to start here with the person who's using us, thank them, understand that use case, but then we take it to different parts of the organization to see where else we can help.
Yeah. And then, and so I think that, but just even like really tactically though, right? Like, how do you identify the right human to be engaged with? Like, say you've got, I don't know, let's say there's like 3 people using it at Airbnb, right? And you've got their first name, their last name, and their email address in the product. Like, take us through like the workflow by which like your rep would be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, we know like we've got 2 users in Airbnb and they're using it really well, but we know that Airbnb is a 5,000 person. I'm just kind of making this up. Actually, our buddy Lenny used to work there. It's a 5,000 person
Yep.
company. And so like typically would have this many of the type of humans that we like take us through this. It's like, okay, let's size it. And
Yep.
then who are the actual people like that we should go attack? And then like, what's the actual mechanism by which you go shopping in Zoom info for
Yep.
that, like on LinkedIn Sales Nav? Like, how does that work?
Those are the two, you just named the two tools that we use most frequently and have integrated within Salesforce. So lead pops up in Salesforce, and we're gonna go ahead and enrich it from first from Zoom info and Discover Work, and then we're gonna look at LinkedIn as well and find out, oh, here's Lenny and here's what he does there at Airbnb, and try to
Mm-hmm.
understand some of the use case. Well, why is he using it? What might he be using it for
So
based
like,
on
here's Lenny, and he's got this title right here. Got it? Because that might reveal to you the type of humans and their weird title that might use this at Airbnb. And then presumably, now let's go look for more titles like that in Airbnb and see how many of those there are.
Right. And using that as a starting point, because I think having relevance and having context when you do outreach, because every single person you talk to, they're getting inundated with emails. And the more generic the email, the less likely the response. But if you can actually talk about, hey, you as director of product management, here's what other director of product managements are using our product for. Here's some of the problems they're trying to solve. Do these resonate with you? How are you using it? And one of the things I always talk to reps about is if you're lucky enough to get someone on the phone, even
Yep.
if they're not a fit, use it as an opportunity to understand how are they using it? What is that person thinking about? Like, what are the challenges that they're trying to solve? And use that for your next conversation. And then the next conversation, when you're talking to someone in a similar role, oh, I was just talking to so-and-so earlier today,
Yep.
and here's what I heard from them. Do you have similar type challenges, or are you thinking about it a different way?
Yeah, it's so funny. This is like I was having lunch with Kyle Porter from Sales Loft the other day, and he was telling me about like we called it like progressive. It's funny at Sales Loft they called it progressive prospecting, but it's actually like progressive discovery. And he was like, it's almost like fractal discovery, and I'll kind of explain what I mean here. It was super funny. He's like, you could start with like ICs, like the rep, right? Like pretend we're Sales Loft in this case. Like talk to like 4 SDRs and then aggregate together the pain points there. And then you can imagine reaching out to a sales development leader or whatever, and then saying, hey, I've had opportunity to talk to a couple of your reps. I would love to, share what what I found with you. Director of sales development is gonna like they're gonna take that meeting, right? Because like here's my findings, right?
Yep.
And then do that a couple of times and then go up the next level, right? It's just like
Yep.
this. Now the problem, of course, is it's like pretty calorically intensive, right? And so you just have to be pretty mindful of whether or not like the juice is worth the squeeze there, right? Um, and I think that that's something like at what point do you know that you like have enough that then you can jump up to whoever like the senior DM is or what have you? Like how do you guys kind of assess that?
I think one of the great call outs of that is the more you do it, the better you are at guessing and making some assumptions and making some assertions that can help you go up the ladder. And so it streamlines it. So if I talk to Sales Loft, I might have one perspective, but if I've talked to 10 other companies, I'm able to get there a little bit faster. And so I think this is
Yep,
one,
I see.
I think it's one of those ones where early on you overinvest in it. Because
Mhm.
the learnings are so valuable and it helps you get to your ICP. And that if you have that, then you can, then the next step is how do we scale this? How do we streamline it? How do we, 10x it? But if you don't do that first part where you invest and truly understand each person, like, hey, what are their concerns? And can I validate this with some lookalike customers and
Mhm.
profile? You don't have enough to go on. You're too generic. And so instead, if you go deep with your first few and then just through repetition, you get faster, you get better. I think that's true, if you're an IC or from a company B2B perspective, that having those learnings is invaluable.
Yeah. What I agree. So we're talking about kind of like when we're identifying that, we've got a set of folks who are using within the organization, and we're gonna like grab them, hug them, talk to them, do some discovery with them, then share that with like more, with decision makers and what have you. And but what about like a pure direct sales motion, right? Where like you show up, like they don't have they don't have users yet, right?
Yep.
And you just have like, I don't know, use Airbnb as an example again. It's just like, hey, VRBO, like you're like, we don't have any users within VRBO, right? Or couch surfing or whatever, but we know that your business probably has document automation needs.
Yep.
Because of, I don't know, onboarding new renters or like new landlords or what have you. How like they're not even using airSlate. They maybe haven't even heard of airSlate.
Yep.
Yeah. So like how do you guys kind of mix those two together? Because they're very different. It's a very different sales motion, right? That like you would say that the latter one that I'm describing is more like, SaaS direct sales 2.0, if you will, right? Like, if like 1.0 was like Salesforce doing the kind of like, predictable revenue, kind of just like, banging the phones, what have you. This is kind of like more rhymes with that. Like you probably don't want the same SDRs doing the like, looking, you probably don't want the same SDRs looking at the, like going through the haystacks as doing this. And so how do you guys have that ladder sales motion? And if so, maybe you can kind of share how you guys have approached that.
Yeah. And it's a newer motion for us, and one we're going to invest really heavily in. And we use a concept, predictable revenue was all about, how you split your AEs and SDRs and things like that. But I think now there's so much more nuance, and we use a concept, Sean, who's our CMO, and I talk about this concept of, we have inbound and we have people, we have hand raisers, someone who's like, I have questions, I want to talk to sales. Great. We're putting priority and urgency around that. We have people who we categorize as passers-by, that maybe they downloaded a white paper or they looked at something, but they're not necessarily saying, hey, we want to talk to sales. Or maybe they have a couple of users, and we think that there's an effort there. So we consider those passers-by, and we build motions with our SDRs around that. How are we going to do outreach? How are we going to leverage? Hey, they've got awareness of us, but how do we get into those strategic conversations? So we have playbooks for doing that. And then the other part is just that pure cold outbound that you're describing. And, I think that it comes down to really, I've always struggled with this. If we do not have a good ideal customer profile of here's the person I'm trying to help, and this is, I've said, hey, e-signature, the beauty is you could sell to anybody. The downside is your target market is everybody. So like, what do you do with that? And if instead you are able to, in this particular instance, here's some of the use cases we're going after. Here's some of the problems we're solving. And just, I love, what I'm doing some of the outbound myself. I'm rolling up the sleeves and I'm having a great time with it in conjunction with the SDRs, because you get to learn from people and find out, hey, are these challenges, are these issues for you? Or what else are you seeing? And then just taking that to the next one, so it's this rinse and repeat, but constantly learning and refining that pitch of, hey, are you having this challenge? Here's what I've heard from other companies, that they're thinking about how much time do my reps spend selling versus how much time do they do manual processes that would better off be automated. Is that something you're thinking about right now? Does that, align with what your CRO or VP of sales, their top priorities as we start thinking about 2023? And, I think one of the other parts is really taking, in today's economy, that every company I know is taking a look at expenses and reassessing, doing the planning for 23, and maybe sales projections are coming down some, but it's strange. It's still a tight hiring market. So if you can't just go out and hire 10 people, one, because you can't find them, and two, because of the fact that from a budget standpoint, you probably can't do that. So how are you going to do more with less? And, I think that's one of the things in sales, that if you weren't value-based before, you better get there awfully quick, because otherwise 2023 is going to be a real challenge for you.
Yeah, and maybe you can unpack that a little bit. And like when you say value based, like how would you maybe take folks through how you would position like the value of like airSlate, and make sure that you're not in feature functionality land, and instead talking about business transformation and what have you.
Yeah. So Michaela, who's our head of customer success, one of the things she always talks about, and make sure that as our account execs close something and we hand it over to customer success, that we're really clear on, what's the workflow goal? What are they trying to achieve here? And what are the business outcomes? And so, as a sales methodology, we use the tried and true MEDDIC. And so we put a lot of emphasis on understanding, hey, what is someone's metric? How are they measuring the success? And one of the things I like to say to a customer is, hey, after you've chosen airSlate, 6 months from now, your boss or the board asks you, how is that working out? How are you measuring the success? And doing that up front to understand, how are we helping them save money? How are we helping them save time? How are we helping them increase sales? What is an actual quantifiable metric that we can point to that helps them be successful? And then we use that with our customer success team to help drive towards it. And I just find the squishier that is, one, the deal is less likely to close. Those are the deals that keep going and going and going. And suddenly people, we've got other priorities. Well, because you haven't talked to them and you haven't uncovered, here's how we're going to help impact your business or your organization in a quantifiable way. And so digging into that, it could be, hey, we spend, I was just did a deal review today, and we were talking about someone who's sending out forms. It costs them $1 to print it. It takes, with the postage, it's $4 to send it out. And then a lot of them come back and they're filled out incorrectly. So then they've got to do it again.
Got to do another loop.
Yeah. And then the other part is the stress. They talked about their employees are feeling very stressed. They're very stretched. And so this is a point of friction. And so what does it cost you if you lose an employee? How long is it going to take you to replace them? What's the cost of that? What's the cost of recruitment, and what's the opportunity cost? What could they be doing instead of, manually doing these things? Is there some way they could be growing your business? And so I think honing in and having those conversations early on, it's one, it's better for sales, but two, it's better for your customer and for your customer success in the long run. And, this is how I think, one of the gold metrics for any public SaaS company these days is around net revenue retention. How do I take and grow? And if you're able to talk about how you're impacting their business, they're going to keep investing. I've got a lot of vendors that we have that, like, hey, they've been successful, and so we're going to add more people, more use cases. Great, I'll sign that all day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of like I had this a fireside chat with David Sachs from Craft Ventures the other day for the last virtual summit. And I think one of the things that is particularly powerful about PLG, but even if it's not PLG, because we actually have a land and expand motion here at Atrium, right? We're not like pure kind of like try it out. Like obviously people are like using Atrium in a pre-transaction environment and so on and so forth. But I think an important thing to think about is like, is your pricing, and not all products can do this, is your pricing such that an organization can buy less to start, to validate it, get to success, and obviously like usage-based pricing is probably a great example of this. Not every product like necessarily like lends itself to that. I'm trying to remember, like I've been a HelloSign user forever. I have like I have like a personal account that's like 10 years old. And I don't think actually, I think HelloSign was subscription. I don't think it was envelope based. I think DocuSign was envelope based. Like in Atrium's case, oftentimes what'll happen is an organization, like a subset of an organization will purchase, like the SDR team will purchase, or like the SMB AE team will purchase, and they'll get to like, wild raving success. And then of course, then the mid-market AE team is like, hey, why do they have that cool, like management tool right there that's like allowing them to be all over their reps goals and and pipeline hygiene and so on and so forth. Like I need that too. But in this case, it's not like some AE knocking on the door and being like, I promise you it's amazing. It's literally the SMB sales manager right there being like, oh yeah, this stuff bangs. It's like, it's fantastic. I think making sure that your pricing is set up that way to facilitate that is a very powerful thing to do. And sometimes organizations don't think about that. This is actually, it's funny. One of the reasons why, so the way that Atrium prices, we price on we call it a manager seat basis. Like we price on per, and there are reasons why we did that, even though most sales tech is priced on a per rep basis. The reason why was we wanted to make it such that an organization could put all of their reps into an Atrium instance, so they could like analyze like 20 people, 40 people, 50 people, et cetera. Even if there's like a single sales operations person using that to like look across 50 reps, our response to that is like, okay, fine. Like, we're giving away some value, but because if we price it on a per rep basis that was in there, they might say like, oh, I only want to put this team in there. We're like, no, we don't want that. We want all like, we want your 40 AEs and your 20 SDRs in there. And like, yeah, maybe only sales ops is going to start out here. Maybe like, we're just going to start in the SDR organization, but having the other folks in there opens the door to those other conversations. And so I think you just have to be thoughtful about your pricing to make sure that you're not like hamstringing yourself in that regard.
And part of the reason I'm out here in Boston, we had a board meeting yesterday and we have a management meeting today. And it's part of our conversation, especially around airSlate. And I think one of the biggest things you need to do in SaaS is make sure that your pricing aligns with the value that you're delivering.
Totally.
So for us, user-based, we have some people who have a couple users and they're getting massive value out of that. And at the same time, like I literally was with one of my reps yesterday and we were talking to them about airSlate and the automation and things like that. They send out 100 proposals per year. So like, okay, that's not a whole lot to, if I price you on you could buy one seat and send those out and you're good all day. But our conversation got a little bit deeper and found out, hey, they're sending out 100 proposals. They close about 20 of them a year. Those are all 7-figure proposals and contracts that they're landing. So going from 20 to 21 would be a massive shift in their business. Like that alone would justify it. And part of it is they're doing Word documents and things like that. They want to use airSlate to do doc generation and to have these proposals look better than they are right now. And then the other part of it is we uncovered they hired a person whose sole job is to create these proposals, and it takes them a day and a half to 2 days to do so. And so when we talked about being able to streamline that person's job and how much more she'd be able to do, and we're doing it at airSlate, we've moved to pricing that's based on the number of what we call bot actions. So basically the number
of perfect.
Yeah. And, as I talked to the VP of sales about this, he was like, that makes so much sense. And he doesn't mind paying me more money because he's going to get so much more value.
More value in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go back to like DocuSign or like, it's just like, oh man, why do I pay for more envelopes? I don't know. You don't like to send more contracts?
Yeah. If you're not paying me more next year, that's a problem. It means like your business isn't growing. Part of what I'm here to do is help you automate and grow your business. So I expect you're going to pay me more. You're going to get more value next year than you do this year. Like that's part of the agreement here. Like, but yeah, you should be paying me more next year. If we're flat for like 5 years, that means your business isn't growing. That's not good for either of us.
Yeah. Henderson has a good question here. He says, I imagine it's directed to me, but we can have you chat on this too. How outspoken do you find that our prospects are about their own metrics versus SDR AEs having to propose ranges, funnel them towards those metrics? Because I just think I think in sales math all the time. I mean, like there's a kind of a key insight is that like, it just turns out that there's like a set of KPIs that matter irrespective of the sales organization, right? Like bookings matter, wins matter, right? Win rate matters, average selling price matters, number of opportunities matters, number of new opportunities matter, amount of pipeline, right? Forward pipeline. It turns out like there's like there's a bunch of metrics that matter that are like kind of generally agreed upon. The problem is that they're like diffusely generally agreed upon. But and the problem is that most organizations like find themselves having to reinvent the wheel versus it would kind of be like every baseball team in the major league in like MLB like coming up with like ERA. It's kind of like silly. It's like ERA and like batting average and slugging percentage. Like these are the metrics that we ought to use in order to understand how this batter is doing and what we need to do in order to improve his performance. Now, it's a newer thing, and this is why like we have to kind of popularize that. But you know, we actually send out these metrics cards that are really helpful for folks in terms of interpreting that. But I think this is like part of the like maturation of sales. There's a maturation of sales in like saying like, hey, these are the ways that we're gonna like aside from bookings, which like duh, right? And like, you know, the forecast, which is like, okay, cool, duh. It's like this number that we think we're tracking to. Okay, well, like what are the metrics that we use to describe all that, like, you know, all the performance and then also to improve people? That's something that's more emergent. And, you know, this is something that has only been like doable in the last like 10 to 15 years because previously like the data wasn't really available. So it's kind of like I do a master class on like Moneyball and sales, and because it hasn't really like data, you didn't have like athletics analytics or like pro sports analytics before you had the data that was available, right? So in baseball, data has been available for a long time because the game's kind of slow. You can like write down stuff, you can score the game manually. Whereas in basketball, right, basketball was really a lot harder to do meaningful analytics as the game is so fast until they got the motion capture cameras, at which point now the data that was available was a lot greater. And so that's like what led to like the analytics revolution in basketball. Like, of course, the Warriors and the Rockets are like the kind of the lead dogs on that stuff. And so, you know, sales is kind of in a similar situation right now where like now the data is available. And so now it's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Well, like, gosh, if we're not measuring, managing and improving our reps using data, like we're probably like, you know, we're probably getting like on the way out, like the dinosaurs. So hopefully that helps answer that question for Henderson. I mean, you've been around for a hot second, Brian. Like I imagine you probably have seen that arc going where like, you know, back when you were at Power Reviews or Oracle, like the amount of information that was available was like pretty sparse. Whereas like now, you know, the amount of information that's available in order to measure your team is a lot richer.
Yeah. And, you know, you have your teams like the Warriors and Rockets and 76ers who are on top of it. And then you see the Lakers last night who have LeBron and nobody who can shoot from outside, right? So you wonder where they're going with it. You know, opening night, I had to get the plug in there, but no, it's such a great point. And you know, going back to Henderson's question and Pete, what you just shared, you know, I think hey, most people are going to come in if they're the decision maker. Now, sometimes you're talking to someone who's been sourced, you know, this is more on the inbound, obviously, but like they're tasked with gathering information. And I think you can, as an SDR or an AE, add a ton of value by helping them understand, you know, they know they're supposed to go out and look at sales management tools. Okay, well, what are some of the key metrics you're looking at? And they go, I don't know. I was just told the guy. Well, you know, typically, here's some of the things that when I talk to other people at companies like yours, here are some of the things I hear. Same thing, you know, if you're talking to a sales ops or rev ops person, of course, you know, hey, they're looking at bookings, they're looking at time to close and things like that. But when you're able to take all of that and then go to a next step with an insight that maybe they haven't thought of, which is, you know, hey, we've seen some really interesting things that the time between the first call and the second call really helps increase the conversion rate. That like if the time between the first call and the second call is more than 7 days, conversion rate dips in half, you know, on one opportunities. Are you seeing something like that? Now suddenly you've got them thinking about a metric that maybe they weren't even, you know, they have that core, but now you've brought your expertise and you've got them thinking about something that wasn't even on their radar.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of times, like customer success, this is something that I tell my AE team all the time, because like one of the things that's really kind of fun about selling Atrium is like, you sell on customer data. And so like we have like this fancy, we call them AEs obviously, but like we have a fancy pants term for our AEs. We call them sales strategy, sales strategy analysts. And but of course they're just AEs. But what they do is like they work with sales leaders to help them see, like to like open their eyes to things that are going on in their data, like, hey, Mr. Sales, and like Brian, you've been around for a hot second, but like more junior sales managers who are maybe like promoted account executives, promoted SDRs, like they don't have those spidey senses yet, and it's like, hey, see how Atrium is noting that this account executive right here has way more untouched ops and way more stuck ops than all of his peers. That's a pipeline hygiene problem right there. You need to have him, you need to stripe time on his calendar for him to do pipeline maintenance, because like he doesn't have more opportunities than everybody else, right? If you did, that might be an overloading thing. He doesn't have more opportunities than everybody else. This is just like a scattered rep. That's okay, right? Like that's what we've all had them. And like what you need to do is help them with like calendar management and be prescriptive around that. And then we're going to watch that metric remediate, right? Like, oh, look, you went from 20 untouched ops out of the 60 ops that are in your pipe to like, oh, look, you're on top of them. Like maybe you closed out 5 that were BS, and then so on and so forth. And so what ends up happening is our account executives, they get like really, really, really good at this. Like they're little like sales math nerds. But the funny thing is like a lot of them are, they're 26, they're 28, what have you, they're 30. And they kind of like, they talk to a guy like you, Brian, and they're like, well, I'm just like little old me. I'm 26 years old. It's like, no. You've interacted with like so many more sales organizations. And so like, you've seen more CRM data and like more sales performance data in the like 6 months you've been working at Atrium, or the 18 months you've been working at Atrium, than these sales leaders have seen like in their lives, because they've like, they're only at like, a new company every like 2 or 3 or 4 years or what have you. You see like 5 new organizations, like sales data per week. And so like helping them understand like, no, you have way more expertise than you give yourself credit for. You should show up and be very forward with that. It can be hard for, a more junior person. I call it like backbone, like installing the backbone. I wonder if there's any kind of like thoughts you have on like how to help those like reps like embrace their inner backbone, if you will.
Yeah. And I think it's true of reps, it's true AEs, SDRs. And so I'll tell you, one of my least favorite phrases is, well, I'm just an SDR. And when people immediately distract themselves, and I tell our SDRs, once you're week 2 on the job, you now have more experience with an e-signature or document workflow buying process than the person, that 99% of the people on the other side of the phone. So don't be intimidated that it's someone who has 20, 25 years experience. You now know more about it than they do. And I just find so much is how you show up. And so when people are hesitant and defensive and leaning back, versus like, hey, how's it going, Pete? Super excited to talk to you about, Atrium and work with lots of customers like you. What's going on? What are you facing? Bringing that energy and enthusiasm, and starting versus like, let me, I did a post last week LinkedIn talking about, sometimes it seems like people are getting ready to do a prostate exam checklist, and it's like, oh, this is fun. So tell me about your volume. How many reps do you have, Pete? Like, let's, bring some energy to it and bring some of your expertise. And I think that just goes so far. And it makes it, one of the things I love sales. Like, sales to me is fun, and we lose track sometimes. And if we're not, if you're not having fun in it, it's a much better experience for everyone involved when you have some fun and bring some energy and some expertise to it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, and this is a little bit of like a superpower that we have, because we get to sell to sales leaders and sales managers, sales ops too, right? But being able to, like, not only is it great from a education and kind of like expertise acquisition standpoint, you also can be like way more fun, because it's like we all know like hey, like don't bullshit a bullshitter. Like, we're all bullshitters here, right? And like that's okay. And so you see this with my reps all the time. They'll be like, hey, so I just like to set an agenda really quickly. right? Like my boss is going to yell at me if I don't do a time check. We're going to do a little bit of discovery questions, going to talk about some of your priorities, do some slides, and and then we'll probably turn on an Atrium account for you so you can kind of see what's going on. Is there anything you'd like to add for that, or did I do an okay job with my upfront contract?
There you go. Boom.
And people love it.
Yeah. Yeah. The product's so good, it probably just sells itself. But I'm making a living here, so if we could just go through some questions, would you mind?
Yeah, we're here anyway.
Yeah.
We're here anyway. Cool, man. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. This was super fun, Brian. I appreciate you taking the time. For folks who are interested in kind of document automation stuff, you should definitely check out airSlate. We're going to be back with Power Hour. We got Brandon Colley from Qualia coming up in our next episode. But otherwise, Brian, really appreciate you taking the time. You have a good rest of your day, okay?
Hey, it's the pinnacle of a 20-year software career, being on with you, man. So thanks for having me.
Get out of here. Okay. So now you are bullshitting a bullshitter. Okay, I'll see you later.
Hey, loser of the big game has to buy the other one a beer.
Oh, I love it. I'm signed up for that. Okay, later, man.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everyone.